Okay, so my name's Roger Dale Brown, and today we're going to have a little fun. So what we're going to do is what I like to call a paint along. I'll paint a little bit, then I'm going to stop, you'll catch up, I'll paint a little bit more, stop, catch up until we finish this painting. Okay, so what we're going to do is, this is the scene I just painted. We're not going to do the whole thing. What we're going to do is the underwater rocks. Okay, I always have in my classes people that want to know how to paint underwater rocks. So that's what we're going to do today. So it's a little exercise. Hopefully you guys can get a lot out of it, and it'll help you along the way. So what we're going to do is just take a section of this, and we're going to do this area right here, just this corner where you see a lot of underwater rocks. You can see a lot of above water rocks. And we'll do some of those too, so maybe you can get a grip on both of them. So anyway, so that's what we're going to do, and we'll get painting right now. Okay, so I mixed up just a little basic earth color, and I'm going to go ahead and draw this in. Just draw the shape in. That's the bank. I'm just going to put some indications where the rocks are going to be. I like making them dark. It kind of gives me a no-tan of the scene. I'm going to go back over the top of it with lighter colors. This just gives me a good starting point of how I'm going to space the rocks, the shapes of them, and how the design is going to work in the canvas. Just the lay of the land, how it's going to fold, how it's going to angle. Okay, then I'm just going to do just a real fast undercoat where the ground plane is. And so we'll use a little bit of transparent red oxide, just a little bit of black to tone that down. I don't want to get it too bright under there. Get a lot of the terp in there. Again, this linen that I use really soaks it in pretty fast, so it's really wet, but by the time I start working on it, it'll be pretty dry. So I'm going to take just a paper towel, dip it in a little bit of the turpentine, and just pull that out. That'll give it a translucency that I want. Okay, it's time for y'all to catch up. Okay, so while y'all were catching up, I mixed up color for the water, and this is just a general color. I don't try to get into different tones in my water. It's just a general color. So the water is mostly blue in there, so I mixed up a blue color. It's ultramarine, black, and just some grays in there to tone it down some. So I'm gonna go ahead and fill in the water with this neutral blue. Again, lots of Gamsol, turpentine, whatever you're using. And let's go ahead and get that in. So I'm not worried about my values are a general value. They're not totally 100% accurate at this stage. I'm just trying to fill in and block in at this point. My value relations are pretty accurate, but the exact value is not. And the reason I do that is sometimes I want to paint something a little bit darker than it actually is, with anticipation of going over the top of it with a lighter color and creating textures and underwater rocks in this instance. So all that in really quickly. You can also see how the colors are harmonizing really well already. And that's because I'm staying in neutrals. I'm not getting too colorful right off the bat. I start off with my darks in a pile in the middle of my palette, and then I just keep working into that pile as the painting proceeds, and that gives it just instant harmony in the scene. At the end of the scene, I'll get a little bit, I'll spread my values out and start adding more clean color, more saturated color at that point. It's just a way to stay in control of your painting and your colors. You know, in this stage I could start to really see the abstract quality, you know, as it relates to the landscape anyway, the abstract quality of my shapes and how they relate to each other. Shapes are so important, especially those initial ones. You don't want equal shapes with anything. You want everything off from each other. So it's kind of like you know, shirt size. So extra large, large, medium, small. As far as your proportions of shapes within the format. Okay, so y'all catch up. Okay, so before we get started again here, I'm just going to scrape down everything, get the excess paint off there. I want everything real thin at this stage, so that helps me to kind of work easier on top of the wet paint. And you can see that that's already pretty dry. It's not scraping off much of anything, but it's pretty thick over here in the water, so I'm going to get that out. Some of this really dark color. So we'll be going over the top of that with some lighter stuff. Okay, so next step is to work inside these shapes. Okay, so I look at the water and then I see other shapes inside that shape. So for instance, the underwater color, or the water that's coming up, is getting shallower as it comes up to the bank. So you're starting to see some warmer, more golden, kind of olive color that's starting to happen there. So I'm going to just treat that as a shape and get that in there. So in my mixture in the middle here, I'm going to add yellow, you know, just a good amount, get enough paint on there. A little bit of transparent red oxide. Okay, so that makes kind of a golden color I'm going to add just a little bit of this earth yellow just for volume. It's kind of the same color. Okay, then a little bit of black just to make it more neutral. All right, now I'm going to test the spot and make sure I have the right tone. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's lighten it just a little bit with some white. And now we'll test it again. Okay. A little bit more yellow. And then let's just add some alizarin and just a touch of black to darken that back up again, and test the spot. Okay, that looks pretty good. Again, I don't want to get too light right off the bat, because then, you know, once I go to put the lighter colors for the tops of the underwater rocks, then I won't have anywhere to go. It's going to get too light, so you got to be very careful with that. And take your time and mix. Just keep mixing until you get that right value, the right tone. Okay. So we're gonna start right up here. As the creek goes back, okay, the distance between the width of this color is going to get smaller, thinner. As it comes forward, you're going to see more of it. It's going to get thicker. It's perspective, and it's how you get distance. It's one of the ways how you get distance in these creek scenes. So let's go ahead and do that. Right over the top of the blue. Okay. Then we're going to go up into the ground plane and mix a couple of colors. One of them is like a golden straw color, and the other one is more of a green grass color that'll be really warm. So I want to save the color of this because I'm going to keep adding to that for the rock. So I'm going to go off on the other half of this pile and add a little black. Okay. Let's add a little bit more. So we're going to make two colors here. Okay. A little yellow. This is yellow medium. And yellow lemon for the other color. Okay, transparent red oxide for this, and cerulean, a little bit of cerulean, not too much, but I just want to blue that up just a little bit. And transparent red oxide. I'm just going to keep adding that until it gets to that nice warm green that I want. So look how that's starting to harmonize with that. Adding that transparent red oxide to it. Still staying green, still leaning more toward the cerulean, but it's got a warmth to it. We're going to have to lighten it up some. And so put white in one of them, white in the other. When you put white in there, especially if it's titanium, it's going to make it a little bit chalky on there. So you have to add some of the color back into it. So a little bit of yellow, transparent. A little bit of lemon. That. Okay, so that's good. Okay, so to start out with just modeling this in with each other. So I'm going to let a little bit of this translucent color that we initially put down come through, and probably make it mostly green. You know, I try to think of things in just like a dominant and a subordinate when it comes to color or value or anything. So on the bank here, for instance, in this shape, is it dominant green or is it dominant the straw color? So it's dominant green, so that'll be the most thing. I don't want anything even in a painting. I want everything to look random. Some paper towels. Okay, we'll go over here to the straw color and just model that in. Maybe a little bit more. Hold on. All right, catch up. Okay, so before we get started again, I'm going to scrape this excess paint off of here. Again, I want to keep it really thin at this point. I don't do this all the time. Sometimes I do want to work thick on thick, but in this instance, you know, I want to keep that really really thin. I don't want, you know, I don't want to get too thick. So when you're looking at shadow areas, when you're looking at underwater rocks, it's got lack of light down there, lack of light in the shadows. So therefore, lack of texture makes it more organic, more real, more believable to the viewer. So if you get like really thick rocks, underwater rocks, and thick paint in that areas or those areas, you know, then it's going to come out towards you, and that's just not the way shadows do, and that's not the way underwater rocks do. So it actually looks like it's more coming out of the water than it's sitting down into the water, or the shadows have too much texture in them, so they become not believable. So keep it thin in the shadow areas, keep it thin in areas like this where it doesn't seem like it, you know, should have a lot of thick paint in there. So scrape that down. Okay, then we're going to go to the rocks here and get the faces of the rocks on there, the lit part of the rocks. Okay, I'm not going to get it as dark as I could because at the very end I'm going to use a palette knife and just kind of dry brush some of the light, really light paint on there. It'll give me texture which will emulate rocks. So I'm just going to take some white and go right in the middle of these three little piles and get a nice putty color, just a neutral color, and that's going to be what I'm going to use to put on the faces of these rocks. I'll go back in and later and just model in some different colors, different tones of there, but this is a starting point for me. So just start with this big rock first, and it's just the shape. I'm just looking at the shape of it, nothing else. You take the easiest route that you can. Don't get too complicated at first. Simple shapes. I always just really try to compartmentalize my plan to paint these paintings, and just have a good focus on what I want to do. I envision my painting, and then I will start to come up with a plan to execute. just going to shape these a little bit better. So, you know, I don't really try to look at individual rocks. I try to look at things as shapes in there. So values overlap and it makes a whole shape. It's more believable to the viewer if things overlap and you don't really make a recognition between one rock to the other. I'm just trying to get some good angles, good shapes in here. I don't want all my angles the same. I don't want all my shapes the same size. Nature is random, so you got to give that quality to your shapes in the scene. Okay, catch up. Okay, so while we're on the rocks, we're gonna just I'm just gonna tell you a little bit about how to make form in the rocks and how I approach those. So everything has three elements, three basic elements to create form, and that is a light side, a halftone, and a shadow side in it. You know, everything's not going to have necessarily a halftone between the shadow and the light area, but some of them will. So we're just going to go in here and just pick random areas to create halftones and shadows, and then also I'm going to throw in reflective light in there too. So, okay, just going to mix a basic color here. Let's just mix a blue, and that'll create a nice little halftone in the scene. So it's going to go right beside there, and you can see how that start to create form in that rock. Okay, and then I'm going to mix a shadow side to that. And then it'll have an accent down at the bottom that'll kind of separate it from the water. So a little bit raw umber, so a little bit warmer accent. Kind of do that. And I'm going to create a little bit of a reflective light in that so in that mixture, in this mixture, I'm going to mix up red and yellow into that. A little bit of white, so it'll be a little bit lighter. I'm going to go up here and do the same thing. Okay, there's not much of a halftone in this rock, but we're going to make a shadow area. Let's just add a little bit of ultramarine black. Okay, so inside this shape right here, it's gonna be reflective light in there. And it's usually a warmer color. It's reflecting what's next to it, which would be the water. You could really see them on rocks in creek areas, rivers. So a little bit of red, a little bit of yellow in that mixture, and then lighten it up. Okay, we'll go to this rock and just mix a little bit of cooler color, kind of a lavender color. You can get creative with the colors. If you go out and look and really study rocks, there's a lot of color in them. They're all neutrals, they're all pastel kind of colors. Not a lot of really intense color, but these little beautiful tones and shifts of color are there.
Go to this one.
Ledge on that rock. And we'll go to the underneath part of that and again just create some little accents. Little warmer accents with some umber. I'm going to put a little bit of transparent red oxide in that. Let's warm it up just a little bit more. Put some accents in there. Go down to these rocks and do the same. A little bit of a half-tone shadow in that. That one's going to be more in shadow because of the direction of where the light is. So I'm just going to darken that and cool that down a little bit. That'll give us more color in these rocks too. It'll be a chance to introduce a cooler color. You can make it purple or blue. I'm going to make it more of an indigo. And again, we'll take some a little bit warmer dark and I'm going to go back here to some of these rocks and then finish it off. Finish that part of it off. Then I'll let you catch up. Give that one a little bit different shape than the others. That a little bit better. Okay, catch up. Okay, so now we're going to go to the underwater rocks and do those. So I'm going to take that initial color and just add a little white and yellow to it. Lighten it up and test the spot. It's actually pretty good. Values in this have to be really close together. You can't get them too light or too dark. If you get them too light, it's just going to look like a bunch of polka dots. If you get it too dark, you won't be able to see them. So again, it's random shapes. Don't be afraid to overlap. If one section overlaps, the other one's going to define that it's a rock anyway. Again, this is just a general color. I'll go back in later on and make some of the underwater rocks a different color. angles will just kind of naturally be pointing back, angled back into the distance. It's a perspective thing. There will always be some random one though that's off from that, so you need to take that into consideration just so it looks more natural. If everything's going the same way, it just doesn't look exactly right. Keep going up through the bank up to the top. So as you go back, those rocks are going to be a little bit more vague, a little bit softer. So I'm using a softer touch actually as I go back, so they're not as defined as what's down in here. As it goes out into the water, you're going to get, it's going into deeper water, so you're not going to see as much of the tops of the rocks. So it's going to, the value is going to be a little bit closer together. So I'm just going to add a little bit of black to the same mixture and darken that up just a little bit. So we can create that effect. And again, as we go back, it's going to get just a little bit more vague than what's up front. Okay, y'all's turn. Okay, so we're going to continue on with the underwater rocks. All those rocks aren't going to be at the same level. Some of them are going to be a little bit taller than others, so therefore the tone will be a little bit lighter. The value will be a little bit lighter. So I'm just going to mix a lighter color and just go back into some of these. And some of them, the tip of it might be up a little bit further, so you can make part of it a little bit lighter, then fade it back down, and all that just creates in more realistic underwater rocks. Let's just do that right here so you can see it a little bit better. The rest of it just kind of gets a little bit darker as it goes deeper. Okay, I'm going to switch the colors up a little bit too, so there'll be some cooler ones. So a little bit of ultramarine into this mixture. Maybe a warmer color, so a little bit of sienna. to a little bit lighter olive color. Okay. Then the shadow side of the rocks in the water will be just a little bit darker indigo color, so a little bit of ultramarine, a little bit of black, and just lighten that up a little bit. So we'll just go right next to some of these. You can see how that punches them out just a little bit. Go out into the water, further in the deeper water. Those accents are going to get a little bit darker. Cooler color again. Just work on this larger one right here, this larger rock. Kind of gives it a nice tone. You don't want to make the edges too hard underneath the water. So I'm just going to take a fan brush and just soften just a little bit some of the edges. Okay. I want y'all to catch up with that one, then we got one more go around with the tops of the rocks and we'll be done. Okay, so let's work on the tops of these rocks just a little bit more, and then we'll go to the tops of the rocks here and finish this off. So I'm going to go right next to this, soften some of those accents down with a few little rocks. And bring that out into the water just a little bit more. Got more rocks to work with. So let's go back up to the these rocks. I'm going to put a little bit of light, a little bit different colors in the tops of those rocks that are out of the water. And just to give it a little bit more light. And this is a lot thicker paint through here, so I'm ending this up. Finishing up those rocks, and so I want to get a little bit thicker, more opaque paint in these areas. And as it comes toward, it was getting a little bit of a cooler color, so I'm just going to go off this pile and mix some ultramarine and cad red light and just kind of get a blue-gray. You get some really beautiful tones playing cools against each other. And if you look at the rocks out there, it kind of does that. It's just different colors in the rocks, or it's catching reflective light from the sky or from the green trees that are around it or whatever. So you can, some of them can have a little green cast to them. Go a little bit more olive. So a little bit of yellow, a little bit of transparent red oxide. Nice tone. Go back to some more of an indigo color. Go a little bit lighter on this. Just take my palette knife. Just kind of skim right over the top of that. A little bit of blue, like a neutral blue, and that rock is getting mostly looks like backlit. Just a touch of yellow. Okay, that's it. Okay, well that's it. Well, thank you so much for painting with me today. I hope that was helpful for you. If you want more in-depth instruction, you can go to bellamuseproductions.com for my latest video, Painting the Sunlit Harbor. It's about painting boats. Can't beat that. You could also go to my website, rogerdalebrown.com, for my latest workshops and other videos. Thanks a bunch.